All right, let's start with the question, see what we got. The student wants to present the significance of the Hart-Celler Act to an audience unfamiliar with the history of U.S. immigration. So the significance is important, but also this piece, unfamiliar with the history of U.S. immigration. So we're going to have to somehow kind of describe that or introduce that. I don't really know. Let's take a look at the bullet points. In the early 1960s, the U.S. had a strict national origins quota system for immigrants. Okay, but if I didn't know about the immigrant system, that seems maybe important, right? It's a strict system. The number of new immigrants allowed from a country each year was based on how many people from that country lived in the U.S. in 1890. So, okay, so it was, well, a certain number was allowed. Let's just leave it at that. The system favored immigrants from Northern Europe. Okay, so all this seems to be saying maybe some things that might be background information. I doubt we're going to use all of it, though. Almost 70% of slots were reserved for immigrants from Great Britain, Ireland, and Germany. The 1965 Hart-Celler Act abolished the national origins quota system. So this is definitely going to be part of it, right? We need to talk about what this act did. So abolishing the quota system, my guess is that we're going to also need to define what the quota system is, which seems to be bullet point 2. I don't know. Let's look at the choices and see what we get. A, almost 70% of slots were reserved for immigrants from Great Britain, Ireland, and Germany at the time the Hart-Celler Act was proposed. No, that doesn't say why the act was important, so that's definitely wrong. Prior to the Hart-Celler Act, new immigration quotas were based on how many people from each country lived in the U.S. in 1890. Maybe, I think someone might pick this because they're like, oh, well then it's suggesting that after the act, the system changed. But it's not actually saying that. So I'd prefer it if they just said it, right? That's what we were tasked to do, was to say why it's significant. Technically, this doesn't say why it's significant. It kind of leaves it to the reader to guess, and that's not great. So let's keep it, but let's look at C. The quota system in place in the early 1960s was abolished by the 1965 Hart-Celler Act. Great, that's definitely saying the significance, but what's the quota system, right? And again, it's not explaining what that is. And if you're unfamiliar with the history of U.S. immigration, that might need some explaining. Let's look at D. The 1965 Hart-Celler Act abolished the national origins quota system, so that seems good, which favored immigrants from Northern Europe. Yeah, I guess that's good. I don't like any of these. The quota system in place in the early 1960s was abolished by the Hart-Celler Act. I don't think this is doing anything to explain the history, right? I want to know the history. So I would say that, like, yeah, this isn't going to do it. This is talking about the 60s, so that's when the act was passed. I'm going to go with D. Let me see if I'm right here. I'm going to go with D. And yeah, D is the answer. I would not be sure about this, to be clear. I would be nervous about this one. This is a mark for review question. The reason I go with D is it definitely accomplishes one of the goals that is very clear, right? What is the significance of the act, right? So choice D says its significance, it abolished the system that was in place. So B does not say that. It hints at it, but I don't like hints. I like to just say things. So then what about the other part? It's audience unfamiliar with the history of U.S. immigration. Well, I guess you could stretch it and say that, whoever was favored was kind of part of that history. I would have preferred if they also included this idea about the 1890s in choice D, but it doesn't. And I guess you can't have everything you want. And this is why, at the end of the day, it's not really about what you want anyway. It's about what the SAT wants. And so I'm kind of deferring back to the original question, and that's why I picked D over B, is I kind of sensed that there are two goals here. And one goal I definitely can accomplish is talking about the significance. And the other goal, I guess there's lots of ways to accomplish. It's a more vague goal, right? Unfamiliar with the history of U.S. immigration. So you just say anything about the past U.S. immigration and you're good. You're kind of accomplishing that. So they chose a fact that I thought was kind of stupid, but I guess it matters. I don't know. Yeah, that's tricky. That's a really tricky one. I could see if you got B, I wouldn't get too mad at yourself about it, but notice how there is a clear difference between those two choices if you picked B, it's probably because you favored the second goal here of the history and didn't favor the first one. But there are a lot of ways to accomplish goal 2. There's only really one way to accomplish goal 1. So I would have stuck with that, and that's what would have made me pick D.